The engine hadn't even cooled down when the brat blocked our driveway and banged his Gucci-ringed fist on the hood of my wife's Mustang. "This car's mine now," he declared like some bad movie villain. "HOA says you owe the community a favor. Consider this your donation." My wife Lisa blinked once. Then she looked him up and down and said calmly, "You ever driven anything that kicks back harder than your mommy's golf cart?" And just like that I knew we were in for a storm. What he didn't know was that Lisa test drives 200 miles per hour NASCAR machines for a living. And this Mustang wasn't just a pretty red convertible. It was a street-legal beast with the soul of a race car. And some kid in loafers had just declared war on it. The irony was thick as smoke from a burnout. When we first moved into this HOA-managed suburb 2 years ago, we thought we were stepping into a quiet cul-de-sac paradise. Lisa and I were both professionals with high-stress jobs and wanted a place where we could decompress. What we got instead was a clique of homeowners who thought enforcement was a hobby. Still, we kept to ourselves, paid the dues, mowed the lawn, and smiled politely. That was until Chadwick Tanner IV entered the scene like a social media influencer who thought real life had a comment section. His parents had recently moved into the corner lot and brought with them a teen so entitled, he made trust fund kids look humble. Chadwick wasn't just any HOA teen. He was the self-declared prince of the community. He rode around in a shiny black BMW coupe that probably cost more than my first house and treated the neighborhood like his runway. Rumor had it his mom used HOA funds to repaint the community sign because Chadwick didn't like the color scheme. It wouldn't surprise me if she did. Between the overpriced sneakers and the entourage of teen followers filming every word he said for TikTok, he had the vibe of someone who never heard the word no and survived on likes and luxury. It all started at the neighborhood car meet. A bunch of us gearheads casually met in the community center lot once a month to show off our ride. Nothing formal, just a way to bond. Lisa rolled up in her 1969 Mustang convertible, freshly waxed and humming like thunder. Heads turned. A few neighbors clapped. Chadwick looked at her like she'd parked a spaceship. He strutted over in his designer hoodie and made his announcement. "Sweet ride. I want it." He wasn't joking. "Name your price," he added, as if everything had a tag on it. Lisa smiled without showing teeth. "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale," he snapped back. "And the HOA owes me for the damage I took at last month's event. This'll cover it." We thought it was a joke. Then came the HOA meeting. Chadwick's mother, the president herself, brought it up under new community obligations. She suggested that Lisa offer the Mustang for community use or reparation, since Chadwick's car had a minor scratch at a prior HOA event. "It's only fair," she insisted. "We all sacrifice for the good of the neighborhood." The room fell silent. One guy coughed. Lisa sat stone still, like a driver waiting for the green light. And then, in a voice colder than her Mustang's air intake, she said, "When your son qualifies for a race license and learns what a clutch does, he can test drive it on a simulator." That should have ended it. But Chadwick wasn't used to being denied. Especially not in public. The next morning, he was outside our house with two of his sycophants filming. Nate and Lisa's Mustang, he declared to his followers, "about to be mine. Stay tuned." Then he actually put a sticky note on the windshield that read "reserved for Chad." I peeled it off and threw it in the trash. He posted about that too, calling us uncooperative boomers. I'm 38. The tension didn't ease. Chadwick's mom sent us a formal letter asking us to appear before the HOA to resolve an ownership misunderstanding. Lisa framed the letter and hung it in the garage. The Mustang, meanwhile, got a new alarm system with motion sensors and a GPS chip connected directly to her phone. She also, without comment, upgraded the tires. When I asked why, she just winked. Because stupid moves fast. And I move faster. What Chadwick didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was what Lisa actually did for a living. By day she was a vehicle performance engineer. But behind closed doors, she was a test driver for some of the fastest machines built in America. Her weekends weren't spent at book clubs or brunch but on private tracks, pushing prototype NASCARs to their limit. The Mustang wasn't just her weekend car. It was her stress therapy and her mechanical playground. The engine bay held more power than most people knew what to do with. The clutch could snap ankles. And the fuel blend? Let's just say it wasn't standard Shell. Then came the drive-by confrontation. We were headed to breakfast when Chadwick swerved in front of our driveway, boxed us in, and leapt out like he was staging a music video. He had a GoPro strapped to his chest and sunglasses too big for his face. "Give me the keys. Last chance," he said, grinning for the camera. Lisa just turned off the engine and looked at him like he was roadkill she hadn't decided to avoid yet. "You ever raced anything that doesn't have valet mode?" she asked. He blinked. "You won't even get it into second." She drove around him so smoothly he didn't realize she'd moved until she was halfway down the block. That clip? It went viral. Not for the reasons he wanted. People started tagging him as Convertible Chad. Memes appeared overnight. One had him holding Lisa's car keys photoshopped into a pacifier. Another had him photoshopped into a NASCAR pit crew, crying. Later that day, Chadwick and his buddies parked across the street for hours. Just watching. Filming. Whispering. Lisa didn't even glance at them as she got out of the car. She knew exactly what was coming next. And so did I. Because kids like Chadwick don't just get mad. They get entitled. They don't retreat. They escalate. And this time, they were about to mess with the wrong woman. Because stealing someone's car is one thing. But trying to take a NASCAR test driver's machine? That's the kind of mistake that gets written into neighborhood legend. Chadwick didn't show his face for 2 full days after the viral clip of Lisa roasting him with nothing but a gear shift and a smirk made its rounds. But the silence didn't mean retreat. It meant strategy. We underestimated how deep his ego ran, and just how far he'd go to try and reclaim control over what he thought was owed to him. Lisa had seen this kind of arrogance before, just never in flip-flops and a Rolex. The first sign came on a Thursday morning. Our mailbox had been stuffed with glossy flyers, all featuring Chadwick posing in front of Lisa's Mustang like it was already his. The text said Community Cruiser, returning this classic ride to its rightful public use. Sponsored by the Tanner family and your HOA leadership. The audacity was so complete it almost felt like satire. But what made Lisa narrow her eyes wasn't the picture. It was the watermark at the bottom. Approved community campaign. Chadwick had actually used HOA funds to print and distribute propaganda claiming her car as communal property. We confronted the HOA board. Lisa brought the flyer, slapped it on the table, and said without emotion, "So whose idea was it to launch a hostile takeover on private property?" The president, Chadwick's mother of course, tried to wave it off. "It's just community engagement, Lisa. Let's not blow this out of proportion." The car was never officially registered with the HOA for residential inventory, so technically there's room for interpretation under our shared access guidelines. Lisa looked her dead in the eye and said, "The only thing this car shares is rubber with the road." One of the newer board members tried to speak up but was quickly shut down with a look from the president. Back home, things escalated. Chadwick started posting Instagram stories with poll questions like should I paint the Mustang midnight black or keep it red, and what should I name her. She even messaged him once with a short and final reply. "Touch the car, and it'll be the last ride you ever sit in with leather seat." He reposted her message and captioned it, "Boomer Rage," complete with laughing emojis. The comments on his post were a mix of kids egging him on and adults telling him to back off before he ended up grounded until college. Then came the real stunt. It was past midnight when my phone buzzed from the sensor alert. I checked the driveway camera and saw 3 figures creeping up toward the car. Chadwick was in the lead, holding something that looked like a phone app controller. The other 2 carried tools. I woke Lisa, and she didn't even blink. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the remote access panel for the Mustang's modified systems. When the car's alarm activated, it didn't just beep, it growled. Literally. The custom speaker system blasted an engine rev noise loud enough to rattle the windows. A smoke flare popped from the rear exhaust like a warning shot. The boys screamed and scattered, tripping over our flower bed on the way out. Lisa sat back down in bed, pulled the covers over herself, and said, "They're lucky I didn't hit ignition override. Would have rolled the front axle forward 6 inches and clipped his designer loafers." The next morning, I forwarded the footage to the HOA with a formal complaint. Lisa included a note requesting the entire board be educated on the laws surrounding attempted theft and private property boundaries. But instead of apologizing or even addressing the issue, the HOA retaliated. That afternoon, we received a notice from the Community Enforcement Liaison citing Lisa's vehicle for non-standard upgrades and unregistered horsepower modifications. It read like it had been written by someone who skimmed a car blog once and decided they were a mechanic. The penalty section claimed the car might be towed or impounded for safety evaluation. Lisa read it silently, then said, "So now they're using fake regulations to steal what they couldn't with lies and tantrums." I nodded. They're desperate. Chadwick's a joke online, and now they're trying to clean it up the only way they know how, by flexing the 1 ounce of power they think they have left. That evening, Lisa made a call. One I hadn't heard her make in over a year. It was to her crew chief at the NASCAR test facility. I only heard her side of the conversation. "Yep, same car. Yeah, it's been kept tuned. No, it hasn't hit track since last fall. I want to activate the transport team. Bring the kit." She hung up, looked at me, and said, "They want to play public relations. Let's give them a parade." 2 days later, a large semi-truck rolled into the neighborhood, painted in full NASCAR livery. The side of the trailer read Performance Motors Testing Division. Residents gathered like it was a festival. HOA board members stood on their lawns pretending to understand what was happening. Out rolled not 1, not 2, but 3 customized Mustangs. One was Lisa's. The other 2 were track-modified variants in full sponsor wrap. A crew of mechanics and pit techs stepped out in uniform and began calibrating equipment in front of our house. Chadwick stood at the end of the block, mouth open. His camera guy started recording, but no one was paying attention. Everyone's eyes were on the scene unfolding in our driveway. Lisa was already in her fire suit, helmet under arm, laughing with one of the pit techs like it was just another Tuesday. Then she turned to the crowd and said, "Since they want to question the safety of my car, I figured I'd let the experts take a look. And since they want to question my qualifications, I invited the people who write the rules." HOA leadership didn't know what to say. Chadwick's mother looked like she was going to either cry or spontaneously combust. When one of the mechanics began explaining telemetry calibration to a curious neighbor, Lisa walked up to the HOA president and handed her a printed packet titled Legal Precedent Regarding HOA Overreach and Vehicular Harassment. "Just thought you might want to read up before your next memo," she said politely. That night, the HOA group chat leaked screenshots from the internal board. Several members were furious about being dragged into Chadwick's mess. One threatened to resign if another fraudulent citation was issued. Another asked why they were suddenly getting media inquiries from local journalists asking about the harassment of a NASCAR professional. Turns out, one of Lisa's old colleagues had tweeted a photo of her standing next to the Mustang with the caption, "When HOA drama meets horsepower." It got picked up fast. We didn't sleep that night because we were anxious. We didn't sleep because Lisa couldn't stop laughing. I told them to leave it alone. I told them. But she knew better than anyone that people like Chadwick don't listen until they've lost something they thought they already owned. He hadn't even started the engine, but he'd already triggered the ignition sequence of his own downfall. And in this race, he wasn't even qualified to start. If there was a moment when Chadwick could have stopped, when he could have just let it all go and walked away with what little dignity he had left, It was that morning after the NASCAR transport spectacle. But entitlement doesn't come with brakes. Instead of backing off, he did what every arrogant teen with too much money and too few consequences does. He went bigger. And this time, he tried to bury Lisa under a mountain of bureaucracy, completely unaware he'd just poked the one bear who kept her claws retracted out of courtesy. The next move came through an official envelope dropped into our mailbox, stamped with the HOA's seal and labeled urgent. Inside was a formal cease and desist letter, citing Lisa for violating community safety standards and operating what they described as an unlicensed modified performance vehicle on residential property. They threw in references to engine noise disturbances, excessive horsepower, and non-regulated speed equipment. The language sounded legal, but it wasn't. It was a Frankenstein's monster of copy jargon from traffic ordinances, motorsport websites, and probably a Wikipedia article on combustion engines. Lisa read it slowly, then set it on the counter like it was a soggy napkin. I could tell she wasn't angry. She was calculating. She didn't even call a lawyer. She didn't need to. Instead, she contacted her motorsports liaison and had the full modification log, emissions certifications, and legal street compliance paperwork shipped to her overnight. Then she scanned and submitted the entire packet to the HOA's compliance inbox, along with a notice of her own. It stated, in clear terms, that continued harassment of her or her vehicle would be interpreted as malicious interference with her work duties, since her testing duties involved the same car, and that legal action would follow. That shut the email chain down faster than a blown piston. Still, the HOA wasn't the main problem. It was Chadwick. The HOA were just the exhaust fumes. He was the engine. 2 days later, we were sitting on the porch drinking coffee when we heard tires squeal around the bend. A black Range Rover barreled into view, swerving dramatically like it was part of a movie chase. It was Chadwick, standing through the sunroof while one of his friends took the wheel. They pulled up across the street and jumped out, cameras already rolling. Chadwick strolled toward the Mustang, which was parked in the driveway under its usual cover. "Let's do this," he announced. "Final claim. I'm taking what should have been mine." Lisa stood up slowly. She didn't say anything. She just walked toward the car, tapped her phone, and the engine roared to life under the tarp. Chadwick froze. The sound was deep, low, and menacing. The rev dropped like a war drum. Then the car inched forward just enough to startle him. His foot slipped. He staggered backward and fell onto the gravel. We thought that might humble him. Instead, it triggered the worst tantrum yet. He scrambled to his feet and yelled loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Fine, you want a challenge, let's do it like men. You and me. A race. Winner takes the car." "You scared of a little competition?" Lisa didn't answer right away. She walked back to the porch, picked up her coffee, took a sip, and said, "When you can keep a car straight through turn 3 at 140, then we'll talk. Until then, go play with your simulator." But that wasn't the end. Later that day, Lisa received an email from a local private racetrack we'd visited once for a charity event. The subject line was race event confirmation. Inside was a full registration under her name, for a one-on-one community challenge scheduled 2 weeks from now, sponsored by the HOA's Youth Engagement Committee. The opponent listed was Chadwick Tanner 4. The registration had been submitted using her name, her email, and even listed the Mustang's VIN. It was fraud. Sloppy but bold. Lisa stared at the screen for a long moment, then started laughing. "He actually thinks he's going to steal the car in front of a crowd," she said. "He's not just entitled. He's cinematic." We contacted the track immediately and shut it down, but word had already spread. Chadwick had posted a custom video montage with drone footage of the neighborhood, slow-motion clips of him revving various cars, and sound bites of Lisa pulled out of context. The video ended with a dramatic shot of him standing beside a digital rendering of the Mustang wrapped in matte black with his name on the side. The caption read, "The Mustang becomes mine. HOA Showdown of the Year." I didn't know whether to be furious or impressed at his production quality. Lisa? She was already on the phone again. 3 days later, another transport arrived. This one smaller but meaner. It carried a newer Mustang prototype built for track performance and cornering trials, not just straight-line speed. Lisa took it out for exactly 5 minutes. When she returned, she was smiling. "It's not about beating him," she said. "It's about erasing every illusion he has of what winning even looks like." And with that, she made the decision to accept the challenge. Publicly. Under one condition. If Chadwick lost, he'd agree to wash every single car in the HOA community every weekend for a month. On camera. Wearing whatever outfit she chose. Chadwick agreed instantly. Of course he did. He was too blinded by ego to realize he was walking into a mechanical buzzsaw. The HOA board, now desperate to shift the narrative away from their failed attempts at legal action, spun it into a community event, complete with flyers, banners, and even food truck. Lisa kept her preparations minimal. She didn't need to train. She lived on the track. But she made one call that changed everything. She reached out to an old friend in local media and leaked the story. Not the race, just the situation. A teenage HOA brat trying to pressure a professional NASCAR driver into giving up her car. That was enough. Within 2 days, several automotive YouTubers picked it up. One even posted a reaction video to Chadwick's drone montage with the title "Rich Kid Challenges Real Racer and is Definitely Gonna Cry." As the day of the race approached, the neighborhood transformed. People hung signs. One house even made shirts that said Team Lisa. Chadwick doubled down. He ordered a custom tracksuit with his name embroidered in gold thread. He rented a high-end Camaro and posted countdown videos every day leading up to the race, each more obnoxious than the last. Lisa posted once. Just a photo of her Mustang's dashboard with the engine lit up and the caption "Let's ride." The night before the race, Chadwick posted a final challenge. A live stream with over 1,000 viewers, most of whom were waiting to roast him. "Tomorrow," he said, standing in front of the rented Camaro, "I take what's mine. I was born to drive. I'm not scared of some over-the-hill track lady. Let's see what she's got." Someone commented midlife crisis meets mid-tier Camaro. Another wrote Lisa's car has more experience than you do. When we went to sleep that night, the house was quieter than usual. Lisa had checked every tire, every sensor, every bolt. She wasn't nervous. She was focused. And when I asked her what she was thinking, she smiled and said, "I just hope he wears something I can laugh at when he's holding that sponge." The sun rose on race day like it knew something was about to go down. By 7 in the morning, the private track 30 minutes outside the HOA was already packed. Folding chairs lined the fence. HOA residents came in droves, many wearing homemade shirts supporting Lisa. One kid had even painted a cardboard sign that read "The Mustang Stays." On the other side of the lot, a smaller but much louder group rallied behind Chadwick. They were mostly his friends and a few younger HOA members who still believed appearances meant substance. Chadwick stood in front of his rented Camaro like it was a throne. He had a gold-trimmed racing suit, branded headband, and a fake sponsorship banner tied to the hood that read HOA Royalty. If it was a joke, it was a committed one. If it wasn't, it was worse. Lisa arrived fashionably late. Not out of arrogance, but because she wanted the pressure to sit with Chadwick just long enough. She drove the Mustang herself, no trailer this time, the engine echoing across the tarmac like a war cry. The car gleamed under the sunlight, every curve catching reflections like it was alive. She wore a black racing suit with red trim and her hair tied back in a braid that said she meant business. She didn't wave. She didn't pose. She parked, stepped out, and handed her helmet to the pit crew with a nod. Her only words to Chadwick were, "You know the rules. You lose, you scrub." He tried to laugh. "Better save that joke for after the tears," he muttered. But his voice cracked just a little. The track owner greeted both drivers and confirmed the terms publicly. 1 lap for warm-up. 3 laps for the race. No shortcuts. No interference. Lisa would start from pole position, a courtesy often given to professionals. Chadwick didn't understand what that meant until he Googled it right there on his phone. His followers circled him with phones ready, but the smirks were thinner today. They'd seen the videos. They'd seen the memes. And part of them knew that no amount of luxury could buy the kind of mastery Lisa carried in her fingertips. Engines fired up. Lisa's Mustang rumbled like a beast awakened. The Camaro barked loudly but unevenly, like it was trying to pretend it had something to prove. The starter waved them forward. One warm-up lap, tires squealing softly as they loosened up. Lisa kept it tight, composed. Chadwick floored it too soon, trying to show off. He took a corner wide and nearly clipped the cone. His friends cheered anyway. The moment the warm-up ended, the starter raised his hand. The flag dropped. And just like that, it was on. The Mustang leapt forward like it had been waiting months for this. Lisa hugged the inside line, tires gripping perfectly. Chadwick's Camaro surged ahead for a moment on the straightaway, but when the first curve hit, he hesitated. Lisa didn't. She swung through the turn like it was muscle memory, tires dancing just shy of the red zone. She passed him before he even realized what happened. From the bleachers, the crowd erupted. On lap 2, she was already 5 car lengths ahead. By the final turn of the third lap, she had doubled that. When she crossed the finish line, the only sound louder than her engine was the cheers. Chadwick came in 7 seconds later, red-faced and barely holding the wheel straight. He got out of the car slowly. His phone crew didn't rush him. The silence from his side was deafening. No amount of filters could edit what just happened. He had been humiliated, and the worst part was, everyone saw it coming but him. Lisa didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She stepped out, handed her helmet back and said, "You got guts, I'll give you that. But guts aren't gears." Then she turned to the crowd and added, "Someone bring him a bucket and sponge. That's the real work." The terms of the bet were broadcast on the HOA livestream. Chadwick had to wash every car in the community for 4 weekends. On camera, in whatever outfit Lisa picked. She chose a fluorescent yellow vest with giant reflective lettering that said Mustang Maintenance in Comic Sans. The internet loved it. The first washing session drew twice as many viewers as the actual race. He scrubbed in shame while HOA members recorded angles for slow-mo edits and reaction videos. Someone added sad violin music. Someone else dubbed over Lisa's race footage with audio from a fighter jet. The fallout hit the HOA leadership like a brick through a stained glass window. The board meeting that followed was packed. Residents demanded accountability. Lisa presented a timeline of every harassment event backed by security footage, social media clips, and the original cease and desist. One by one, board members distanced themselves from the president and her son. When the vote came to remove her from office, only one vote opposed it, hers. Her resignation was announced that same evening. Chadwick's name was quietly removed from the youth committee. The new president issued a formal apology to Lisa and Nate. He also passed a new rule that all HOA-issued complaints had to go through a double approval system. The phrase Karen-proofing the rules caught on quickly. Lisa didn't ask for special treatment after the win. But respect followed her everywhere. Neighbors who once avoided conversations were now offering driveway spots for her Mustang. Kids asked her to speak at career day. A local mechanic asked if he could apprentice under her during weekends. She agreed. But only if he could change brake pads blindfolded, which he took as a challenge. Nate mostly watched the change with amusement. He was proud of her, of course. But what he loved most was how she never changed for anyone, not the HOA, not the board, not some teenage loudmouth with a phone and a fantasy. She stayed grounded. Fierce but fair. Chadwick served out his full sentence of car washes. By the second week, he stopped trying to pretend it was a joke and just did the work. Quietly. Thoroughly. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it did shift the tone. On the last day of his punishment, he walked up to Nate while scrubbing down a dusty SUV and said, Your wife's car, it's insane. I didn't know. I really didn't. Nate didn't say anything at first. Then he nodded and replied, that's the thing, kid. You don't know what people have been through. But sometimes you can learn. The hard way's still a way. Chadwick offered to help clean the Mustang as a gesture. Lisa allowed it. He didn't say much during the process. Just worked. Asked a few technical questions. She answered. It was quiet. Peaceful. Redemptive, in a way that didn't need to be posted or filmed. The neighborhood had found a new rhythm. One built not on power plays or entitlement, but on mutual respect and lessons learned the hard way. When the final sponge was wrung out and the hose coiled away, Lisa looked over the glinting red of her Mustang and smiled. Not because she'd won, but because she'd made a point without losing herself. The car stayed. The chaos passed. And in the rear view, all that remained was the clean glimmer of pride, and maybe, just maybe, a little humility soaking in. The quiet that followed wasn't just the end of a feud, it was the start of something new. With Chadwick's ego officially deflated and his mother no longer holding the HOA gavel, the neighborhood began to breathe in a way it hadn't in years. Tension loosened. Neighbors started talking in ways that went beyond the usual forced greetings. There was laughter echoing from front lawns again. Someone even organized a block party, the first in over 5 years. Lisa didn't attend as a celebrity or a victor. She showed up with her Mustang parked nearby, 2 folding chairs, and a crock pot of her legendary barbecue beans. When a couple of dads tried to crowd her asking for racing tips, she laughed and said, "First tip, don't let a 17-year-old drive your ego." The race didn't just shift perceptions. It reset the rules. The new HOA president, a former engineer named Terry who believed more in logic than drama, worked with Lisa to draft a new section in the HOA code, one built on protecting property rights and preventing abuse of authority. They called it the Fair Access and Conduct Clause, but locals had another name for it, the Convertible Clause. It was a quiet nod to what had unfolded, and even Lisa had to admit the name had a nice ring. The rule ensured that no property, vehicle, or otherwise, could be requisitioned or targeted by community leadership without a due process hearing, full transparency, and member vote. It also introduced a formal complaint appeal process and required every board member to complete an annual ethics training. Lisa offered to teach the first one. Everyone accepted. The car itself became more than just a vehicle. It turned into a symbol, a gathering point, and oddly enough, a unifier. Neighbors who'd never spoken before now chatted beside it. Kids asked to take pictures with it like it was a museum piece. Lisa obliged, sometimes lifting the hood and walking them through the engine like it was a living organism. One Saturday morning, a shy 10-year-old girl with big glasses and a bigger curiosity stood silently beside the car, eyes wide. Lisa knelt down beside her and said, "Want to hear how she sounds?" The girl nodded without a word. Lisa started the engine. The girl grinned so wide it looked like her face might split in two. She didn't stop talking about it for days, according to her dad, who dropped off a thank you note and a homemade apple pie a week later. Lisa didn't gloat. She didn't change. She still wore grease-stained jeans around the house and cursed when she dropped a wrench. But something in her had eased. She was always confident, but now there was a stillness, like she'd faced down a hurricane and realized she didn't even need to raise her voice to silence it. Nate noticed the change too. There was a calm in her smile now, like someone who knew exactly what she was worth and no longer had to prove it. Not to anyone. Not even herself. Chadwick didn't disappear. But he changed. After finishing his community car wash sentence, he stopped trying to film everything. He returned the Range Rover and started using a much older sedan. Rumor had it his parents cut back on his privileges to remind him what reality felt like. Whether it was punishment or a course correction, it worked. One afternoon, he approached Lisa while she was checking the Mustang's suspension. No cameras, no followers, just him. "I was a jerk," he said plainly. "And I didn't understand. I didn't get why it mattered so much. But I think I do now. Lisa didn't say anything right away. She just looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Good, she said. Now what matters is what you do next. That following weekend, Chadwick showed up at the garage with his sleeves rolled up and a toolkit borrowed from his dad. He didn't ask for a selfie. He didn't ask for clout. He asked to learn. And Lisa, with a kind of grace only earned through grit, told him to grab a stool. That afternoon, he helped change oil, swap brake pads, and inspect a rear axle. He didn't complain once. And when he left, Lisa turned to Nate and said, "He might still be annoying, but at least now he knows which end of a socket wrench to hold." The story caught one last wave of attention when a motorsports magazine picked it up. They called it the Mustang Showdown and featured Lisa in a full spread, half about her career and half about the neighborhood feud turned community revival. The photo showed her leaning against the Mustang, arms crossed, grease on her forearms, with a grin that said she didn't need anyone's approval. The HOA even framed a copy and hung it in the clubhouse. Right next to it was a new plaque, listing the HOA's updated community values. The final line read, "Entitlement has no parking space here." One morning a few weeks later, Lisa asked Nate to help her with something unusual. They walked to the back of the property, to an unused patch of land that had once been a tangled mess of weeds and junk. Lisa pointed around with a small notebook in hand. "I've been thinking," she said. "I want to build a real garage here. With a full bay, maybe a lift, and a place where local kids can learn what a real engine looks like. No judgment, no politics, just tools, time, and truth." Nate smiled. "You thinking nonprofit?" She grinned. "I'm thinking redemption, one spark plug at a time." By the end of the month, plans were in motion. Donations came in from neighbors and fans. A local hardware store offered discounted materials. Volunteers signed up to help lay the foundation. Even Terry, the new HOA president, came by with a wheelbarrow and 3 gallons of paint. Lisa didn't want to change the world. She just wanted to make her corner of it better. And as Nate watched her talk shop with 3 teenagers holding clipboards and asking about torque specs, he knew she already had. The Mustang, of course, remained front and center. It didn't need to win another race. It didn't need a spotlight. It just needed to be exactly what it had always been, fierce, beautiful, and unapologetically hers. Every time she turned the key and the engine growled to life, it was a reminder. Not just of speed or victory, but of identity. Of power handled with grace. Of the idea that sometimes the most meaningful wins come not from crossing a finish line, but from showing someone how to rebuild what they thought they'd broken. One evening, just as the sun began to dip below the rooftops, Chadwick walked up the driveway. He was carrying a wrapped box, unsure, hesitant. He handed it to Lisa without much ceremony and said, "For the garage. If it's not too late." Inside was a brand new torque wrench, engraved with the words "earned, not given." Lisa held it in her hands for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're learning," she said. He smiled, just a little, and walked off. The driveway lights flickered on. Nate stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the shadows lengthen. "You think this'll hold?" he asked. Lisa looked out over the neighborhood, the Mustang, the blueprints spread on the workbench. "It'll hold," she said. "Because this time we built it right." And with that, the engine turned over one more time, not just a sound, but a promise. That some things can't be taken. They have to be understood. And if you're lucky, maybe even shared.